Okay, good morning. So we are now going to begin to delve a little bit into the Yud Gimmel Ikarim themselves, and to get a sense of context, we'll do some historical stuff a little bit later. But I think there's something that we need to look at right from the get-go, as the Americans would say, right from the off, and that is the number 13. We'll have to talk about a little bit. Does everybody agree with the Rambam? And there's a much more fundamental problem, which is, why do we have to believe anything? Does a Jew need to believe anything? In fact, there is actually a book by a certain professor, Kellner, of Haifa University, and it's called Must a Jew Believe Anything? Not sure we'll delve into it, but one of the ideas that there is dogma in Judaism. You come across that word, dogma? Dogma, I think it's a Latin word, and it means something that you just have to accept, something you have to believe. This is one of the things that Moses Mendelssohn was very involved with, and it became called jokingly, it became the dogma of dogmalessness Judaism. Okay, I'm going ahead of myself. You know what? Let's go back to the Rambam. Let's see why it is important. Does it make a difference? Does it make a difference halachically whether a person subscribes? We need to look at it also hashkafically, kabbalistically as well. But does it make a difference whether you subscribe to these principles or not? Because, as you may know, the Abarbanel, for example, wrote a Sefer Rosh Amona, in which he argued with the Rambam on some of these things. So some people mistakenly, I might add, use this as to say, well, you see, the Rishonim also argued with the Rambam, so we can argue with, where do we draw the line? Does it make a difference halachically? So let's look at what the Rambam himself has to say to start with. Let me explain to you what we're going to do. This here is from the Pirush HaMishnayos LaHarambam, which was written in Arabic. This is where he details the Yud Gimmel Ikarim in very clear terms. The translation we're using is the one of Rav Kafir. I have the Kabbalah from my Rebbe, the Gates of Rosh Shiva, that this is the right one to use. I may have mentioned this to you. It's not Ibn Tibbon's translation. This was Rabbi Yosef Kafir's translation, the one Mosad Rav Kook. This one for the benefit of those, okay? And he wrote it in his introduction, really, to the 10th parak of Sanhedrin. Why? And here is where it becomes utterly, utterly relevant. I have a whole shelf of Sfarim on these things. I'm happy to share them with you another time with pleasure. No problem. We can go through the bibliography. Kol Yisrael yesh lehem chelek lo'olam haba. Everybody knows this, right? From Shabbos afternoon, right? Every Yid has a chelek in olam haba, whatever that means. But people forget the next part of the same Mishnah, which is ve'elu she'ein lohem chelek lo'olam haba. There are those that do not have a chelek in olam haba. Ha'omer ein tchias hamesim, says the Mishnah. If somebody says there is no tchias hamesim, or pick it up from the top of the page, what you have over here, somebody who says ein Torah min hashamayim. Can you see it? Top of your page there. Yes. Somebody who says ein Torah min hashamayim va'apikoros, and an apikoros has no chelik in olam haba. Let's stop right there for a minute. Now, apikoros is one of my favorite words, and I think I've told you why. Remember why? It's amazing. I think it's the only one I can think of where it's a Greek word, epikuros. Okay? It is a word which in English denotes sophistication, a person of incredibly good taste. And it's used as a compliment. And as we would use it, if we would ever use it, it is certainly not a compliment. It's probably one of the biggest insults you can give somebody. It's basically somebody who has no chelik in olam haba. It is an absolute, the opposite of an insult. It's the opposite of a compliment. It's an insult. It's a fascinating example of the same word when used in English or secular culture. It denotes a person of good palate, and sophistication, because the word Epicurean means, and I'm sure you have the equivalent in German as well, I have no doubt if you look it up in the dictionary, it means somebody who has a very fine palate and appreciates good food and wine. And of course it's based on hedonism. Thus, yes, yeah, except it's, probably a little bit more subtle. I haven't looked it up in the German dictionary, but I imagine it's there as well. And it means somebody who really understands and appreciates food and wine, and it comes from Greek, Epicurus, hedonism. There is only this world and the world of sensory, of physical sensations and hanor, and there is nothing else, basically. And for us, it's an Epicurus. Now, let's stop here and let us learn. I've highlighted it for you here in the Pirush HaMishnayos with a little arrow there. Can you see it? Says the Rambam. Umilas Epicurus. This word Epicurus, he milo aramit. It's an Aramean word. I thought it was Greek. I still think it's, not sure what he means by Aramit, meaning as opposed to Greek. I don't know. In Yono, its context here is hahakolo v'hazilzul b'toira o b'chachmei ha'toira. A denigration is the correct term. To make light of, it's the opposite of praising something, right? Insulting. Torah or chachmei haTorah. Ulefichach manichim shem ze bestam. So we use this word as a general catch-all phrase, a term. Al misha einoi ma'amin biyasodos haTorah. Somebody who does not believe in the yasodos of the Torah. Oy mevaze hachachomim oy eze talmidei chachomim sheyihye oy rabbi. Or if you are mevaze a Talmud Chacham, whether or not he is your Rebbe or not, that is an Epicurus. So somebody who's an Epicurus has no chelek in olam haba. He goes on to explain, go over the page, I'm cutting out the bits that we don't need. Umima shero'oi she'azkir kan. And it is appropriate that I mention here, v'zehu hamokim hayose roi lahazkiram boy. This is the most appropriate place to mention these things. She'ikrei Torasenu ha'tahora v'yisodoseha shloish esrei yisodos. The foundational beliefs and ideas that underpin Yiddishkeit. There are 13 Yisodos, and then he starts going through them. A Yisod Rishon. We're not going to do that today. We'll come back to this. Okay? So this is the first place where it finds expression. Go to the next, turn over the page, and this is from the same, this is a few pages later, after he has enumerated, elaborated, elucidated, explained the Yud Gimmel Ikarim. He then says, V'ka'asher yihiyu kayomim la'odom kol ha'yisodos halolu ve'emunosoi bahem amitis. When a person has these things clear, strong, Harehu nichnas bichlal Yisrael. You have now entered into Klal Yisrael. Let's stop there for a second. This is a fascinating phrase. This is an amazing phrase. He is saying that only somebody who subscribes, not only subscribes to, but has his emunah in these ideas are amitis. It's true. It seems to be not even superficial, but somebody who is really knowledgeable of and understands and subscribes to these 13, he is nichnas bichlal Yisrael. Now, let's stop here for a second. What on earth can the Rambam mean? What can he not mean? Let's do it backwards. What can he not mean?
That is not a Jew.
Correct. Of course, if somebody is born of a Jewish mother, the Rambam is certainly not suggesting that if you, for whatever reason, and we're going to devote 1 or 2 shiurim just to this concept. We'll come back to it, but not today. The famous Reb Chaim Brisker's Anebach Epicurus, which we'll come back to. Fascinating topic. But there's no shaila, there's no way that the Rambam can mean that if you do not subscribe to these, you're not Jewish. Right? We're all agreed on that? I think that's pretty obvious. So, but he does say that if you believe them, then you are nichnas bichlal Yisrael. You have entered into klal Yisrael. Interesting. So it is your identity, your Jewish identity, qua as halacha, as an identity of being a member of Klal Yisrael with the concomitant obligations that come as a result of it. What does that mean? What does it actually mean? Those that come with it, those that accompany it. So what does that mean? So Jewish, if you're born of a Jewish mother or you've done a proper gerus, you're Jewish, no shaila. If you believe and subscribe to these Yud Gimmel Ikarim, then something happens to you. Your identity expands and it becomes incorporated within Klal Yisrael. All of a sudden, you are a fully fledged member of Klal Yisrael. Now, he doesn't mean, again, we said, he doesn't mean that you're not Jewish there can't be. So what does it mean? It's not just some fluffy, airy, philosophical concept. He goes straight down the next word to halacha. V'chayva le'ahavoi v'lachmoi lalav. It creates obligations. This expanded identity, as a result of subscribing to these Yud Gimmel Ikarim, it gives you obligations, or it gives others obligations. It now becomes obligatory on every other upstanding member of Klal Yisrael to love you, to care for you, to look out for you. And that is the first thing. Yes, Eli.
Dare to say, or correct me if I'm wrong, nowadays, religious Jews are a minority in Klal Yisrael, and when you see all Jews...
That's a fact. That's a fact.
So, they would be, according to the Rambam, the real Klal.
Big question mark. Big question.
But they're religious. They are the Klal.
So can we're going to minority. It goes back to what I mentioned before, and we have to park it for today because it's a topic which we will get into because it has halachic and hashkafic ramifications. Many of the Jews you will come into contact with will never have heard of the Rambam, much less the 13 Ikarim. So where does that put them? What is their what is their status vis-a-vis these things? Big sugya, the sugya of Tinik Shanishba, and like I mentioned before, that's what I was alluding to before, and that we're going to have to see. It's really, really fascinating, and we'll probably spend more than 2 shiurim on it because there's a lot of solid Maram so down to Rabbi Yashiv and fascinating stuff. But let's keep it simple for the moment, yeah? Okay, so it means chayva la'ahavoi v'lachmon alav. There is an obligation to love this person, to have compassion on him. V'chol ma shetziva Hashem oisanu ze al ze min ha'ahava v'achva. Everything that Hashem has commanded us to be part of a broader social unit where we need to look out for each other, to hashavas aveda, to look out for somebody's property, for their welfare, etc., etc. Va'afilu also ma sheyochel liyes minu aveiros machmas ta'avosoi v'his gabrus yitzrei hara. What would be if one of these people who does subscribe to these Yud Gimmel Ikarim, but one day his Yetzirah gets the better of him and he finds himself in McDonald's for supper? Then, Harehu nenash lefi goydel meriyoi, he will get punished relative to how great the rebellion and transgression is. V'yesh lo chelek, but he still has this chelek. V'hu mipoishe Yisrael, he is considered to be a Jew who has strayed. An errant Jew, somebody who has strayed. Did you notice, by the way, his usage of the word v'yesh lo chelek? Did you notice that? How did that come in? Yesh lo chelek. I would venture, you with me? I think what's going on over here is as follows. And had I not heard or seen a vort from the Dubna Magid many years ago, I'm not sure I would have picked up on the subtlety of the language of the Rambam here. Yeah. What does the Dubna Magid say? Kol Yisrael yeshem chelik l'olam haba. He says, Klal Yisrael have a chelik l'olam haba. And this is what you're doing. Very good. I think that's exactly what's happening over here. This is what he's talking about. You are nichnas b'chlal Yisrael, and therefore he says, v'yesh lo chelek. That's exactly what he means. Because if you were to understand that every Jew individually has his own chelek, then it doesn't really flow with the whole thrust of what he's saying here. The thrust is you are nichnas bichlal Yisrael as a result of these, and therefore v'yesh lo chelek, and therefore all of these a denial of these 13 is to detach yourself from this eternal entity called Klal Yisrael. And here we could ask ourselves, if we were being academic, we could ask ourselves, well, what's the default position? Do you need to detach? Are you by default attached? A kid, a Jewish kid is born. They become bar mitzvah. Are they automatically attached, but they can detach? And this, perhaps one could argue, the default is Kol Yisrael yesh lahem chelek le'olam haba, but ve'elu she'ein lahem chelek, they are the exception. Or is it, let me just finish the shaila, the lomdish shaila is, or is it the other way around? That you have to actively analyze, think about, subscribe to these 13 in order to attach yourself. What is the default? I'm just throwing out a question. He was first. Yes.
No.
Sammy. Go on.
No, I was just wondering if one can actively detach. Like, can I?
Ve'elu she'ein lahem chelek le'olam haba. Duh. I mean, that's what we're learning.
No, but can you just detach yourself?
Explain.
No, we said a Jew is born by a Jewish mother.
Yeah.
And then we say that, so the one of the default position is, okay, he's in Klal Yisrael, that's it.
You are Jewish.
Yeah.
I'm asking again. There is no question that if somebody who's born of a Jewish mother is Jewish. My question at this stage is, the Rambam has now explained to us this thing of having a chelek means that you need to subscribe to these Yud Gimmel in order to be nichnas b'chlal Yisrael. And I'm pointing out something which you might think is revolutionary and radical. It sounds a little bit like you don't automatically, yes, Kol Yisrael Yashem Chelek Le'olam Haba means not every Jew, but it means Klal Yisrael. But you need to be nichnas b'chlal Yisrael in order. So does that mean every 13-year-old boy? I know David Genetz is when I learn with the Bar Mitzvah boys, I do something else, but he's doing the Yud Gimmel Ikarim with that class. Maybe that's the right thing to do, because otherwise they could become Bar Mitzvah possibly and not have a chelek, because you say to them, does Hashem have you take a 13-year-old boy, does Hashem have a body, for example? Or is Moshe Rabbeinu's nevuah, I don't know, I've never thought about it really. I'm 12, I'm 13, I care about football and computers and, so there's possibly a position here, which I think seems to fit very much with the text, that you actively need to attach. I'm turning around, I'm flipping your question, not to detach. It's almost as if you have an onus to attach yourself. And by the way, this fits very beautifully with the very surprising Mishnah that goes on a little bit later, which says, Hapoiresh midarkei tzibur. Yes? Somebody who separates himself from the tzibur doesn't have a chelik in olam haba. And the Rambam brings this, by the way, very fascinating Rambam. The Rambam says in Hilchos Tshuva, which we're going to see, you'll actually see, that Hapoiresh midarkei tzibur does not mean that you do any single Aveira in Shulchan Aruch. You keep every single mitzvah and never ever do an Aveira, and yet you have no chelik in olam haba because you don't daven with Klal Yisrael. You don't share in their tzoros. You don't fast with them. You're not fascinating. And this would seem to fit. So this may seem radical, but so far I think it is supported. What were you going to say?
Kind of wanted to touch on that topic.
Right. Yeah. So far, to be continued, but so far it looks this way. Let's finish this off. Let's finish this bit off. If a person has a doubt in any one of these yisodos, so he started off and says that they are on the positive side, they are kayomim, all of these yisodos, and your emunah in them is amitis. Then you are nichlal. But the opposite of this is if a person questions, is perplexed, unclear, one of these yisodes, hareze yotza min haklal, you have exited from the klal. v'kofar be'ikar, and he is denied the main kofar be'ikar, the main ideas of Yiddishkeit, v'nikra min v'apikoros v'koitzeitz binatiyos. And such a person is called a min and an apikoros, or an apikoros. What is that? What is that vav here? Question mark. He is called a min and an apikoros and koitzeitz binatiyos, which is a reference to the Gemara in Chagiga with acher. Literally, it means to cut away at the saplings, at the basis of what it means to be Jewish. The Rambam is going to give us a halachic definition in Hilchas Tshuva. Very good question. V'chayva l'sanoisai, it is an obligation to hate him, ulahashmidai, and to get rid of him. Now, this obviously does not mean, certainly not halacha l'maisa, but it's a mitzvah to chayva, there's an obligation to hate him. Those who hate you, Hashem, I will hate. Strong words. So, looking at this paragraph as it stands, what is the default? It has to, if it's kayam, then you're nichnas, but if you're mefakfeik, yotzam min haklal. Yefakfeik always means a doubt. Pikpuk and nidnud. That is the...
Radical.
Sorry?
It's a quite radical state. I mean, it would say if you're actively questioning something, would be more common than having doubt.
Yefakfeik...
wanting to believe and looking forward to strengthen your emunah. You have the moment of doubt, but you still come with a state of mind of I want to strengthen my emunah. I just have to learn more. I have to go into it. I have to understand better. Also, I'm not saying we should say in order to come to that point. Or is it the question, an active question, like, no, I questioned it because it doesn't make sense. And
yes, we'll have to refer to Meir Nevuchim.
Big difference.
Does make a big difference. Let's see how he paskins it. Remember, this was written in Arabic. This is the Persian Mishnayos, although this is the best Hebrew translation that we have, but it is a translation. We will now look in the Rambam in Yad, which he wrote in Lashon HaKodesh. Let's see. Let's just finish this off. Next paragraph. I've already spoken at great length, which is out stylistically, is not my style here in Pirush Mishnayos. Because remember, I didn't do this with you, but there are 2 pages of where he goes through the 13 Ikrim in detail. Why did I do this? There is a great benefit in the emunah. What I've done here is I've done you the benefit of compiling together from many, many different sources. Hayei bohem mu'ushar. V'chazoir al dvarai, and here he says something very interesting. He says, "Chazoir al dvarai elu pamim rabbis." Go over what I have just written many, many times. V'hizboinen bahem heitev, and analyze and reflect on them deeply. V'im tashle oischa machshavtcha shekvar hivanto inyanov mipam achas eser. If you think that you've understood this by reading this once or 10 times, Hashem yoideya shebesheker. God knows that you are wrong. You cannot possibly fully understand what I have written with just learning it once, or, we say once or twice. He says once or 10 times. The Altamah boy, don't read it fast. Lefishani loikasavtiv. I didn't write it Echshen is damin. I didn't just write it, in English we would say higgledy-piggledy. I didn't just write it just like this, without Elo achar hizboinenus v'yishuv adas v'iyun b'deyos nechonos v'bilti nechonos. And I put a lot of effort into this to make it very, very, very clear and very precise. So he's putting this is a massive statement from the Rambam. Okay? Now, let us now look at one of the places, next page. Let's look at one of the pages in, one of the sources in Halacha, Hilchos Tshuva. There are others, But we will now look in. Alles good? Working. It is working.
Yes.
Yeah, alles good. Okay. There is something in Hilchos Shchita, there is something in Hilchos Deis and Hilchos Mamrim. Perhaps we'll get to that a bit later. Let's learn a few halachas here. Rambam Hilchos Tshuva Perek Gimel. Habeinonim. This is within the context of talking about Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. Tzadikim, Rishonim, and Beinonim. And it's interesting that it comes in here. You could ask various questions. I mean, in Hilchos Deis, in Yesodei HaTorah, he discusses some of the things you need to know. Ahavas Hashem, Yiras Hashem, which don't make it into the 13. I mean, by the way, we're going to who can think of a really good example of something that is absolutely fundamental for Yiddishkeit but did not make it into the 13? I'm not going to answer it, but I am going to, because I want to make you think a little bit. Bechira is the answer. You would have thought the concept of free will and accountability go hand in hand. Schar va'onesh she does bring, right? But schar va'onesh is utterly meaningless if you do not subscribe to the notion of free will. If you are a determinist, hard or soft, they come in various types. But if you are a determinist, then schar va'onesh makes no sense. So you might say to me, so why do we have a legal and a judicial system? Das ist eine gute Frage. It has a whole different, the philosophical basis of a secular penal system whereby we send people to prison or punish them is, if there's an illogicality in that, and that's something you need to think about a little bit. If I am born on the wrong side of the tracks and I have no opportunities, and I have to do drugs and, knock little old ladies over the head in order to make money, etc., whatever, then, but you're still quite happy to send me to prison for the same as somebody else, it's a problem. Not for now, but it's a philosophical problem. But in Yiddishkeit, if Hashem is punishing and Schar va'onesh does make it into the top 13, but Bechira doesn't. But one presupposes the other. That means we need to redefine what we mean by these 13, just by the way. So, back to Hilchos Tshuva here. Habeinonim. Im hoya b'chlal mechza avonos. If you're half and half, if one of the mitzvahs that the averas which makes you half is a bad avera, such as you never put on tefillin, then you are judged. But v'yesh lechelik l'olam haba. V'chein kol harushoyim. All Rishoyim that have more averas than mitzvahs, they are judged on the basis of their averas. V'yesh lahen chelek l'olam haba. Shekol Yisrael yesh lahen chelek l'olam haba. Af al pi shechotu. Shene'emar v'amech kolim tzadikim l'olam yeshu eretz. Eretz ze moshel. Kloimar eretz hachayim. V'hu ha'olam haba. V'chein chasidei umas ha'olam yesh lahen chelek l'olam haba. So, you may be a Rasha. One may be a Rasha that has many more averas than mitzvahs. You will get punished for them, but the fact that you are a Rasha does not mean that you don't have a chelik in Olam Haba, because Kol Yisrael yesh lahen chelik l'Olam Haba. Interesting. Then he goes on, halacha, yes, sorry, and then he goes on to say, but, sorry, Ed, what do you want to say?
We'll see what will happen. How much it completes this or not.
Do you have a question?
One could say, like, isn't the Rasha always doubting or being...
No. A Rasha is, that's why he wrote, a Rasha could easily be somebody who has more averas than mitzvahs. Why he has those averas? He could be a weak guy, he has a lot of Yetzer Hara and Taiva, and he just gives into it, and he has no moral backbone. And he did actually say that in Pirush Mishnayos, remember? So far, I don't think there's any challenge. Let's see. Ve'elu she'ein lahem chelek l'olam haba. Elo, what does it mean to not have a chelek in Olam haba? Elo nichrosin v'oivdin. They are cut away and they are lost. V'nidoinin al goydel rishon v'chatosom, and they are judged for their great averas la'olam u'la'olmei olamim, for all of eternity. Ouch. So you do get eternity, but it's not the kind of eternity that you really want. You have no chelik in Olam Haba. That's it. You're in a Gehenna of some sort. You are punished forever. Charming. Now, who are these people? Roll up. Probably no drum roll. Haminim v'ha'apikosim v'ha'koifrim b'Torah v'ha'koifrim b'tchias hamesim v'ha'koifrim b'bias hagoyel v'ha'mashumodim u'machtiei harabim v'ha'poshim midarkei tzibur v'ha'oisim aveiros b'yad roma b'farhesia ki yehoyakim v'ha'moisrim u'matilei ema ala tzibur shaloi l'shem shamayim v'shoifchei damim u'ba'alei lashon hara v'hamoisheich orlasai. Wow. Let's count them out. Minim, apikorsim, kaifrim b'Torah, kaifrim b'tchias hamesim, kaifrim b'bias hagoyel, meshumodim, machti harabim, poshim midarkei tzibur, oisim averos b'yad roma, moisrim, run out of fingers, u'matile ema ala tzibur shel l'shem shamayim, shoifchei damim, ba'alei lashon hara v'hamoisheich orlasai. 14 categories of people that do have no chelik in Olam Haba. Minim and apikorasim. Here he counts them separately. Now, we need a definition. Here we go. Chamisha heim hanikroim minin. There are 5 categories of people who are considered to be a min. Ha'omer ein shom eloya. Somebody who says there is no God is a min. Ve'ein la'olam manhig. And there is nobody, no entity that runs the world.
So agnostics.
Correct.
Would not because they would because they say there is no God.
No, they don't.
Well,
There's no God. They say
agnostics say, I don't know if yes or no.
yeah, but they say that there's just like this. There's a manhik oilam. That's what.
do they?
Yeah.
Agnostic means that they are, the way I understood it, first of all, I think it's probably almost irrelevant because there are very few agnostics today. To be an agnostic is to be probably intellectually lazy. It's either to be intellectually lazy, you don't even have the guts to say I'm an atheist, or it means somebody who has really, we spoke about this once, somebody who's worked it out. Told me the story when I had somebody who claimed to be a rude guy at my Shabbos table. Remember the story? No? I must have told you the story. I'm usually quite polite host, usually. But every now and again, if somebody really decides to be intentionally rude, it's only happened once. Somebody who really was, is quite happy to drink my fine wine and eat my wife's good food. The fact that he was secular was neither here nor there. Of course, we're very happy to have anybody around our Shabbos table and have very interesting, robust discussion. But he was just rude. And he just very... After giving in for a bit and just being quiet, eventually I decided I would say something. And he was, it's all rubbish and I'm an atheist. And I said, wow, I've always wanted to meet an atheist. Tell me, how did you manage to weigh up, the teleological, ontological, cosmological, philosophical, moral arguments for and against the existence of God, historical, archaeological, and everything, and manage to work out that the evidence on one side outweighed the other? That is an incredible intellectual feat. That's amazing. Please share it with us. So he went, no. He said, I don't mean I'm an atheist. I'm an agnostic. I said, wow, that's an even greater intellectual feat. That means you managed to weigh up all of the evidence for and against, and you came to the conclusion that they're both exactly equal. That's an even greater intellectual feat. Please share it with us. I'd love to hear. Silence. I said, oh, you mean you're ignorant? Okay, let's talk. Okay, so again, don't try this at home. And it is not something... No. It was really being incredibly rude. And they're making other people... Oh, yeah. Everybody laughed. Again, this is something I have done once in 30 plus years. And I'm only mentioning it because you mentioned that it's your fault. You atheist and agnostic. The truth is, the reality is, unless you're talking about coming across somebody who is a genuine academic and really has intellectually and investigated, most people are intellectually lazy. Very few people have their own views. They regurgitate what they've read at a very superficial level.
must say, I met people that acknowledge the ignorance. But saying like, on one hand, I have the feeling, I know I have the like intuition, I believe that there's something bigger, something like a creator, something like, let's call it God, whatever. But on the other hand, I'm also, science and all the.
Yeah, that's perfectly legit, as they say. But they're not a real. That's not a real. It's not a real agnostic. Let's just finish this off for today. That's just to be intellectually lazy. So 5 people are minim. Number 1, somebody says there is no God and the world has no lead, nobody that runs it. Number 2, somebody says there is somebody that leads it, but there are 2 or more. And this you have to know. This was the Egyptian and many other pagan things had. You've got in Christianity as well. You got the devil. You got the Antichrist, whatever they call it, and there are these 2 things that kind of are battling. Who's winning? The forces of good or the forces of evil? And that's, by the way, the Bara'ah. This is what one of the things Moshe Rabbeinu was pointing out. The sun god of interesting. It's not a coincidence. The sun god of Mitzrayim was called Ra. Yeah. Ra. R-A. Ra. So you shouldn't say Bara'ah Haitziyam. This is, yes, Hashem is definitely powerful, but he's the bad side. He's Bara. He was punishing. And he took them out Bara. Now they're going to die in the midbar. So he had to show that there's chesed, to show that it's only one. That's the depth of what was happening there. You with me? Think about it. Think about it. But, so the concept of 2, the concept of 2 is very well established in pagan and ancient religions. And even to some extent in Christianity. But to believe that is 2 or more? No, you're a min. And somebody says there is one, but he is corporeal, physical. And here is where the Raavad famously interjects and says, I have seen many people who are, we should look at the Lashon, who are as clever as the Rambam, and they believe that God has a body, and they're not apikorasim. Shelve that, we'll come back to that later, okay? The Raavad here on the Rambam. He isn't the first. And also somebody who serves Avodah Zarah. In order to be an intermediary between him and Hashem, all of these 5 are considered a min, and then there are 3 which are apikorasim. What is an apikoros? Somebody, there is no such thing as prophecy. Ve'ein shom mada, and there is ve'ein shom mada shemagia mehaboirei lelev bnei adam. There is no information flow from Hashem to the hearts of people. That is an impossibility. He is infinite. I agree, he exists, but we are so finite there can be no direct information flow from him to our hearts. Somebody who denies the nevuah of Moshe Rabbeinu, somebody who says that Hashem does not know what's going on, those 3 are an apikoros. And then you've got the Kofrim B'Torah, and those who deny the Torah, the eternity of the Torah, that we still have the same Torah, etc., etc. Okay. So we have Minim, Apikosim, and Kofrim B'Torah. Therefore, and this is where we'll end for today, what we have shown is, we haven't gone into them yet, but what we have shown is the need for these 13 is because it has halachic implications. We haven't even got yet to what the Rambam wrote in Pirush Mishnayos, how we relate to each other and the chiyuvim that we have to look after each other. Those are very real, practical halachic implications. We haven't spoken about who you can count for a minyan, who you can't count for a minyan. These are all this. So therefore, subscribing to these 13 principles is really, really important. Now, what is the default?